Hey Rachel,
Hey Ryan.
how are you?
Good.
Very well. That's you sound good.
Yeah. Welcome on board Starship Yum Yum.
Yes, this is the YumYumPodcast, likingly called that because yum yum. It's the greatest line ever written in all of media. And where did that piece of dialogue come from, Rachel? What piece of media did yum yum come from?
Star Trek Discovery, also known as STD.
No, Star Trek Disco. That's what the fans want you to call it. That's what we are. We're fans of Star Trek.
That's not the heading for your notes, Ryan.
No, you're right. It's done STD in my notes. So I'm Ryan, and that's Rachel. Ryan and Rachel Sliwinski, and we are YumYumPod. This is our show Yum Yum Trek, the first episode of this, and like Rachel said, we mentioned Star Trek Discovery. We are going to be talking about Star Trek Discovery episode by episode. For those who haven't caught up on our previous episode released on this feed, just to go through it again, we have both seen Star Trek Discovery before. We watched it while it aired. This is our second watch of it. This is our rewatch of it. We're going in with a glimmer of optimism and an ounce of cynicism because the show left us mixed, especially the first season was a mixed bag, while the second season, we both openly said, had more animosity towards it, especially the second half of that season. But we're wanting to come back, do a rewatch, see how we feel about it, and talk about the show and just delve right into it. So, of course, this being our second watch, we are going to be talking in general spoilery type stuff. We are Star Trek fans, so we may refer to things from previous Star Treks and down the line of this show, and maybe even a little bit of Star Trek Picard, because there is a note in here I have about Star Trek Picard that factors in to this first episode of Star Trek Discovery. Rachel, what is the first episode of Star Trek Discovery?
So this is on IMDb. This is CBS's synopsis of the first
CBS
episode.
All Access?
So, no, it doesn't say All Access, but
Okay.
it just says that this is the synopsis that CBS has provided.
CBS.
Yeah.
Do they have All Access?
So, while patrolling Federation space, the USS Shenzhou encounters...
Shenzhou.
Georgia to Shenzhou.
Sorry, they said it a lot.
Yeah, they do. We'll get to issues with names later. Shenzhou.
The USS Shenzhou is
Shenzhou.
Show
On behalf of Captain Giorgio and the entire crew of the USS Shenzhou,
encounters an object of unknown origin, putting First Officer Michael Burnham to her greatest test yet.
That's an apt yet very vague description of the episode. What was the episode called?
The Vulcan Hello.
So, Season 1, Episode 1, The Vulcan Hello, and yep, that is a very vague description of the episode, yet it isn't necessarily wrong. So...
Do you want to know the rating for that episode too?
8.4.
No.
No? Not that high?
7.1.
Ooh, okay. I wouldn't rate it an 8.4, but I was just generalizingly guessing. Rachel, this is our second watching of this. We know where things go. Yes. We know where characters are this episode.
We know where things don't go.
We know where things don't go. We know where things do go. This episode is primarily building up the foundation and the ideas of this particular show's take on the universe of Star Trek, but what I garnered from it more importantly, or at least what interested me, was how they built the characters that we are going to be following through the show, primarily Michael Burnham and Saru, and they also have Philippa Georgiou, but that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah.
Is it Georgiou or Georgiou? Because I swear they pronounce it both ways in this this singular episode.
Georgia to Shenzhou.
I think it's Georgiou.
Yeah, it would be the latter.
Georgiou. But Philippa Georgiou. So that's what interested me, was seeing how they built up this and us rewatching it, knowing where these characters go. And in some ways, I'm satisfied with the introducing factors. And in other ways, I'm disappointed because I know some of these factors don't get fully fleshed out or continue on. And that is like with these characters, like with
Various
Michael and
loose threads are already appearing.
yeah, and this rewatching of it because just to get into how we felt about this episode, how did you feel about this episode on this rewatch? And do you remember how you felt the first time?
I remember feeling excited. But that was because we already kind of knew that it was going to be a dumpster fire.
Wow, you felt that more than I. I was always a bit more optimistic. I'm like, oh, we've got Brian Fuller on board, and this was kind of when it was first coming out. We didn't fully know the background of he got kicked off, that he left the show, and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, well, Brian Fuller's written for Star Trek before, and
he's previously written good episodes. But we've both watched a lot of other Brian Fuller things.
As a showrunner, he's a little bit sloppy.
Yes.
As an individual screenwriter, I think he's pretty good, but as a showrunner, he's like Stephen Moffat.
Yeah.
Both are good writers of individual stories in another pre-established thing, but as showrunners, people in charge of a whole thing, it's a little bit hit and miss.
Yeah. But with those other shows that Brian Fuller has been in charge of, they've always had really good ideas.
Yeah. He's an idea guy.
There's always a little bit too much studio involvement and direction, and he never really gets to fully go in.
True.
To the way that you want it to, or he then goes too far. So we were dubious going into it. I was just like, let me bask in the glow of this dumpster fire. And then I remember watching the first episode and being like, like, it's a pilot.
It's pretty decent. It's a two-parter.
It's really hard to tell yet, but I do remember being just as annoyed about all the exposition dumps.
Yeah, that's the thing. There are some exposition dumps. Now, for myself, I can't remember. I think at the time, I think both episodes, or maybe we watched the two. I can't remember if
we watched
the first two episodes
together.
came out at the same time because it's a double parter kind of effect, or if we just watched them back to back. But it's kind of hard to judge this because it is a pilot that's a double parter, like most Star Trek pilots, except for the original series. But I remember being excited for it. I remember enjoying the first episode. There were things that I obviously did not like as a Star Trek fan, and some might say a purist, but I understand that Star Trek isn't continuity focused. There's lots of continuity things, but there's lots of things that were throwing me off. There's robot crew members, holograms, ships that giant starships can now just land on planets, when that was the whole thing about Voyager as a ship, and that was like things that got to me continuity wise, but I had to put those aside and go, Star Trek hasn't always been continuity focused. I mean, Klingons changed looks all the time, and that being said, from the outset, I did not like the new Klingon design. This time round, viewing it again, I still don't like it, but I think it's because I've become accustomed to what they are, that I just go, fine, but I still don't like them. But upon this watch of the episode, how did you feel?
So, just as a reminder, this is meant to be 10 years before the start of the original series.
Yeah, before Kirk.
So it's before Kirk, but where is it in relation to Enterprise again?
Oh, it's after Enterprise.
Yeah. So it's meant to be in between those two things, but we have a totally different set of technology.
But it's after the Cage.
Yeah.
So technically the original series still started before this because the unaired pilot, The Cage, is before this. So it's in between things.
Well, that's assumed. We don't actually get a star date specifically for...
No, we know this because via the second season.
Yeah, we know it's implied in...
So you're saying this is 10 years before?
So this is 10 years before. My feeling about this episode was the original question, was it not?
Yeah. How did you feel about it on this watch?
This watch, I still was very annoyed at the exposition dumps, like I said.
I trust you with my life, Michael. I'm going to die. Wink, wink.
Yeah.
I want to save you, Commander Captain Giorgio. I want to save your life. Wink, wink. She's going to die.
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking of like the heavy-handed foreshadowing even. I was just thinking about how it's just like,
you've been my officer for 7 years, and you were born you were raised on Vulcan, and
yeah.
you're a xenoanthropologist.
I don't trust you. I think I was more annoyed by the way that they were representing Saru and the dollops of casual racism.
How so?
So
Of what, Saru as a character, or just throughout the show?
Either blatant racism or just stereotyping of his race, which basically the same thing. But they're just like, all Kelpians are like this, or he's just like this. They do it with the Klingons as well.
Yeah,
it's just like, Starfleet's not meant to have any racism.
Well, no, they do have racism. I've watched Next Gen. I've watched Deep Space Nine.
Like, they're meant to be better at hiding it. Like, Kirk is a blatant racist against Klingons, but
at a certain point.
Yeah, and then
he's like Michael. They have a personal baggage because of a death of family, because Klingons, and that's we'll get into that later.
But the idea is that we've overcome institutionalized racism.
Well, we'd like to think we have, yeah.
Well, in Starfleet.
Yeah, in Starfleet, you like to think it.
So that annoys me quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because they then try and turn it round later and pretend like, oh no, we weren't like that.
So I'm getting a feeling you weren't a big fan. When we were watching the episode, I remarked that I have a lot of positive notes, and you just grimaced and said, I don't think I really have any positive notes. I have mainly negatives, and I was just like, yeesh.
My main positives were things that had nothing to do with the writing. So
writing's just a part of the show,
yeah.
Rich.
So for the most part, I really thought that they did a good job with the special effects.
Yeah.
Like, they clearly gave the people enough time and resources to work on those things.
Except for that CGI flipper hand from that random alien at the very beginning on that planet. That was crap. But the other CG was great.
Yeah.
That was the introductory CG too. It wasn't very nice.
Yeah, the main kind of stakehold pieces of special effects were very good, very well rendered. For the most part, I like the art direction.
Yeah, I agree.
I still don't like that they wear sneakers.
I hated the fact that on their sneaker boots, they have to pin them closed Starfleet badges, like the symbol.
Yeah.
I hate that. I think it's just a little too overkill, because we already have their uniforms. The sides of their uniforms under their arms along their ribs is like miniaturized silver and or gold Starfleet symbols, and that's like overkill enough.
Weird kind of tessellated Starfleet.
So you like the look of the show and the like the art direction and the
I like the art
effects.
direction. I do not really like the lighting, but I think
the
that's
lens,
also
you don't like lens flares?
I think that's also because I know that the lighting gets so much worse.
Oh, maybe. Definitely.
Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna change my opinion on that, because I'd like to see what's going on. I'd like to be able to tell what's happening and
What?
yeah.
You don't like spinning the camera around a million times?
I got really, really sad when they did that, because it was like, it's like the first time that they do it, it's through like a CG shot, and it's like going, like it's zooming in and onto the Shazao, and
Shenzhou, do you copy?
it's just like, yeah, and then it does a flip for no reason.
There's nothing wrong with flips. So,
and it just turns, and it's just like, why are we doing a somersault through the shields? I don't know.
Nobody knows. I liked this episode quite a bit, actually, to my chagrin. I was, as I said in the previous episode, and in this episode, I'm trying to be optimistic, and I'm trying to be that for the sake of doing this podcast, to try and be a little bit objective. But of course, when it comes to things like this, there's obviously going to be a subjective quality, and I was, to be honest, dreading this. I said to Rachel when we started this, like, to put on the episode, I'm like, are we ready for the trash? And I will be honest, I found myself enjoying this first episode. And yes, it does have major faults, bad exposition, there's some clunky writing, but there's lots of things that I did enjoy. Like, for one, I enjoyed the little expedition on the planet at the very beginning. Although they're breaking Prime Directive, even though they think they're not, they are.
Yeah,
but it's Star Trek. I'm used to them breaking Prime Directives and thinking that they're not doing it.
It's just like...
Prime Directive has been inconsistent a lot in rules. Picard will be the kind of guy who will say, well, we have to let this planet filled with civilized people just fucking die for our principles.
It's
but then in something like this...
It's still breaking the Prime Directive if you don't get caught.
Yeah, that's still...
It's still breaking the principle.
But the Prime Directive is
okay,
a
I can
rule
accept
that,
it.
Yeah.
I can accept it. They're trying to do the right thing and save the potential.
Yeah, and we've seen
of
Star Trek
this
do this
race.
before. You like Star Trek Voyager, and Janeway breaks the Prime Directive a lot.
All the fucking time.
And the Prime Directive is a writer's tool of how much they're willing to bend or break it and or strictly adhere to it. So that was fun. But what I liked about the intro was it was cheesy in a good 90s Trek fashion, in which they drew the Starfleet symbol, the badge symbol on the sand, and that made the ship come. That was good cheese. I enjoyed that. And I liked Philippa and Michael's back and forth. Although it was a little bit too obvious exposition heavy, they had a clear history with one another that I feel that the writing portrayed. I think the actors portrayed that, but the writing itself in portions did the, I've been here for 7 years and I want you to have the commander's seat. And all that was a little bit too blur when those two actresses, they communicate with just their demeanor that they've known each other for ages. We don't need the beat you over the head thing, but I did like that opener. You know what I liked about it, Rachel? Just talking about lighting. The lighting was good on the planet. Like, it didn't look like later on in the season when we go to the, spoiler alert, mirror universe and they go down to an alien planet and it's just that quarry that they keep using and using different filters on. This felt like an actual desert alien planet that they went to. It didn't feel like some quarry. And I'm going to miss that feeling. I'm gonna miss the feeling of when they actually go down to alien planets and do Prime Directive things.
You mean putting in effort?
Not putting in effort necessarily, but doing Star Trek things because that's something. But I enjoyed that cheese. I don't know if you enjoyed that cheese at the beginning, but it was good, fun, little cheesy back and forth dialogue.
An issue that I had with that though is that the first lines that they exchange, which is part of building this relationship, is ADR. It is so stiff and wooden. And
isolated. Like, both their audio sounds isolated and they're just, the audio feels like it's sitting next to each other. Yeah,
it just sounds like it's just been plopped in because there's no background noise. Like, the music is, like, kind of just faded out. And it goes into the dialogue and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah, the audio decision in the show is very peculiar because the actual show opens up with the Klingon bad guy narrating, which is a very bold choice to do because...
I like it.
You like it?
I like that it's open.
To the villains?
It opens up with the villains, and I like that it has the subtitles for the Klingon and they're actually speaking in their native tongue.
I like that too.
Does annoy me. Like, I kind of get it, but I don't like that he says the "we come in peace" in English.
Oh, and he looks directly into the camera. That was too much.
Yeah.
And I think it was already ruined for me because it's a galaxy. We're zooming out, and then it zooms out of his eyeball.
They have
that's in his eyeball.
A real thing for eyes.
Symbolism.
They really use that asset for the special effects on the eyes.
But we love eyes.
a lot.
The eyes is the
Are
window to the soul.
Yeah.
I've studied writing too.
Yeah. Like, I would have liked it if they did stick with, like, kind of the culture of the Klingons, and peace was obviously said in English,
Yeah.
because that would go
It's
with...
not a word they have, right?
Yeah, like, it wouldn't be a word that they have.
Like fluffy.
Yeah, but they have words for unity and acquisition. So they should, like, they use those two words in these first two episodes in Klingon.
In Klingon,
So
yeah.
we know that there's a
Something.
translation that could have been that.
Well, they are an empire. I know they're made of
Yeah.
houses and clans, but they do have a
Well,
sense of an empire.
Yeah, they
at
had
one
the
point.
houses because the Klingon Empire has been in disarray for centuries, as they
Yes.
expo dump later in the episode.
Oh yeah, with that opening though, here's the thing with the Klingon. Just to go back to what I was going to say about
Yeah.
the audio stuff. One of the major problems with the Klingons is they're speaking their language, which is a fictional language. I know that, you can learn Klingon, but most people don't know Klingon. Or as I used to call it, Klingonese.
Half the quadrant knows it. That's why they're learning to speak Klingonese.
Here's the issue that one has. They modulate their voices to be deeper, and you can hear that it's modulated. If you can pay attention to audio, you can hear the audio being modulated, and that becomes one of the issues with the Klingons that I don't want to get too much into in this episode because
Yeah.
the next episode Klingons are far more in, but one of the major issues is being able to tell Klingons apart because of their new
Yeah.
design. And when you break it down to just audio level, I cannot tell you
No,
if you
it
put a
makes
track
it
of a Klingon
harder.
speaking, I could not tell you which one's which because they all have this modulated voice,
Yeah,
and
like
that makes it
they
hard to
apply
distinguish
the same
them.
filter over
Even
all
the women.
of them, and then it's just like they've got the stock prosthetics.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to tell, and the only point that you get to where you can kind of recognize them is when we get to the point when it's just kind of like
One's white, one's black, one's got face paint.
Yeah, I was just gonna say even simpler than that. The face paint one is great, but like at the start they have all of the different ranks shown
Yeah.
through the clothing, and it's when you get one character from each rank and everybody else has disappeared
Yeah.
that you're like, okay, well, she's that color and wearing that outfit. That
So
means that it must be her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's an odd thing, but I had a lot more positives with the show overall. For instance, I thought the show did a good job of doing that, or did a semi-good job, especially in comparison to later on in the series, including this season and then the second season, of having the characters do what I love in Star Trek, which is having debates about what the plan should be, having
Yeah.
conversations, but not only conversations, but conversations that are from the ideological standpoint of each individual character, and we totally understand where each one's coming from.
Point of view and different points
From either
and-
their specialty or their own personal belief.
and you can understand why each of them are coming at the problem in a certain way, because that's part of what really makes the relationship in TOS of
the Trinity.
the Trinity is that they all bring their own things and their own
That's
baggage, but it's like Kirk's ability to listen to himself and the other two
That's right.
that really elevate all of those discussions, because you don't know that he's just gonna go with like he might take this bit from Spock and this bit from Bones,
like all
or he might
captains-
just go rogue.
like all the captains, their job is to listen to their crew and determine which is the best set to go on. Mediate. They're mediators for their own crew. Of course, they have to step in and say, no, this is what's happening. Giorgio does a really good job of that. I really like Philippa Giorgio as a character, this version of her.
Yeah.
We'll talk about Empress later down the track, but I really like that she does this good job of listening to both of them and making a middle ground and even egging them on to say, hey, that's a good idea from you and that's a good idea from you. You're both going to go. And countering Saru's obvious cowardly nature by proposing something that he himself has set a trap for himself to fall into, and then when he doesn't actually want to go, that kind of puts his point as being moot. And we've seen that done so many times in Star Trek, from Janeway, from Sisko, from Picard, from Kirk, from Archer. And that's what I loved about this first episode, is people in rooms debating one another, and the camera was actually pretty still for the most part.
Yes,
there wasn't lots of spinning and lots of gliding
around each of the characters, because it does get to a point where it feels like they've set up like Spiral X tracks for the camera on the ground.
But I thought that was wonderful stuff. I thought that stuff was great. And look, the Saru racism thing that you talked about, I get what you're talking about, why that was negative. For me, that was a slight positive, because I'm used to Star Trek doing that kind of thing where, like, Worf in TNG, they would let you know he's a Klingon and he thinks like a Klingon, even though he was raised on Earth. But we'll get it. That's a whole other can of worms. But like that line about Saru is afraid. Well, he's a Kelpian, aren't they always? Or he's suspicious. It was a sleazy, sly, very obvious way of just letting us know. He's cautious, that's what his race is like.
That's what his race is like.
And I get that for a script that's introducing them, you have to just throw a line like that there. Personally, I think they did a good enough job with just how his character was reacting to things to give you that idea. But they want to set up this whole, because we've never seen a Kelpian before. What the fuck is that all about?
I just had an issue with the amount of times where it's like, this person is like this because of their race, and that is what they will always be.
Well, we'll definitely talk about that when we get to the second episode of because that deals with that a lot more.
It's just like Klingons will always do this, Kelpians will always do this, but they're not like humans will do this.
Yeah.
They don't even really say that Starfleet is like this.
Here's something I want to ask you when it comes to this as a rewatch, and this will be something that will be asked and rung over again and again in episodes to come. You, my own sister, my own father, many people, even me, really liked Michael Burnham to begin with, and then that deterioration happened. And a part of it was, we're getting a really strong, compelling female character who's the central focus. Janeway was a strong female character, and some people still have mixed feelings on her, but she wasn't as central of a character. Obviously, she was the captain, but as Star Trek shows go, there are no real definitive main characters. Like, you have a captain, but it's always whatever episode. You wouldn't necessarily say Janeway is the main character, but the show doesn't follow her with every breathing moment of every episode like Michael is in this show.
Yeah.
You liked Michael from the beginning because she was a strong, centered female character, and it was refreshing to get that because other series had, a Yeoman Rand or Deanna Troi, and women were kind of eye candy. And not saying that there aren't strong female characters in in Star Trek. I like Dax. I like Major Kira. I mean, I don't love Major Kira, but I like what she's about. But how do you feel now upon watching this first episode? Like, just this first episode. Divorce yourself as much as you can from where you know her character goes. In this first episode, do you feel like this was a good building foundation for this strong, independent, female-driven character that you were wanting from Star Trek?
If I do divorce myself, I still have, like, just on the basis of this one episode, there is a lot there, and they do start to try and layer up her character with the added flashbacks help a lot because we get to see what she was like as a child, what she experienced, her trauma, what she was like when she came on board, and that's after Giorgio says, like, I've starting to chip away at your Vulcan exterior.
I can't remember if that's in this one or the second one.
No, she mentioned something on the planet about about her being more emotional.
Yeah.
But she has that little bit of monologue about the
So
stuff later.
you divorcing yourself from the rest of it, you do think this was a great setup for a strong female character? Because I do. I still think that this setup for her is pretty strong. I like this idea.
I wouldn't say great.
I have one note that counters my own argument here, by the way, in this episode, and it's titled "The Death of Michael Burnham to Myself." But I personally think it is an interesting setup for a character, and she does have ideas and ideological standpoints that are fascinating as a thing that I would like to see in further episodes. Unfortunately, I don't think, but maybe upon rewatch, because like I said, I'm shocked by how much I actually enjoyed this first episode. But I think there's stuff here that could have been more fleshed out and interesting, that were great setup points.
Yeah. Like, there's lots of interesting things. Like I've said from the beginning, this show doesn't have a problem with having interesting ideas. It's things being fleshed out and reaching their potential. That's the real issue. And the fact that it very much deviates away from being Star Trek.
Yeah, I found it very disheartening as well this episode, because it does remind me of things that don't get followed through. And like, I did not remember she's an exoanthropologist.
Yeah, I did.
A xenoanthropologist, because when I think of Michael, I think of not her really thinking about alien cultures that much. It's not something I would define as a thing that she is interested in necessarily. I know on our rewatches we're going to be seeing moments of that more so, but in my memories of her, when I think of her as a character, xenoanthropologist isn't a thing that I associate with her. And seeing it said in this episode, and here's the thing, they show it. She has absolute awe and wonder when she's on that alien planet. She has absolute awe and wonder to the point of a dangerous degree when she sees that a Klingon artifact where it's supposed to be a flyby. And that would irritate me more because she breaks the rules. But I understand because she's so fascinated. And we've seen that happen with Spock and other characters who are fascinated to a dangerous point. And I thought, great, this is wonderful. But then they kind of alter that once she finds out that they're Klingons. Then she's like, I fucking hate things. I fucking hate alien life, and I want to kill. But I'm being hyperbolic. But I think that stuff's cool. I liked little moments. like when they had to look at it through a telescope. I like when Star Trek always does the old school things. The things that still work in a world where holograms and sensors and all of that exist. A telescope will still work. A compass will still do the job. I love those little touches.
What's that? It's called a compass. It finds north. I got it from my friend Captain Crandall over in Infinity Lake. He's even older than Picard.
I will say that I remember the xenoanthropology a little bit more, because I remember how many times I was annoyed with the inconsistencies with her knowledge, which do start in this episode. Like, she kind of immediately recognizes and then is backed up by the computer that it's a Klingon thing. Yeah. Because at this stage they haven't had much contact with the Klingons.
It's been 100 years, apparently.
It's been 100 years since they've even seen one.
Except for her. With her family being massacred by them.
Yeah, well, she wasn't there.
She was there.
She didn't see a Klingon, though, did she?
In her flashback, or at least when she's looking at the footage, she's seeing the Klingon attack. I'm just saying, it's been 100 years since the Earth people have seen them, but not necessarily for her. She at least has an attachment to the Klingons that the other characters don't have.
Yeah, and that kind of continues where the writers will give her an important piece of information, but not all of the information, because something needs to be discovered. So it's like
discovery.
Yeah, it's like she can't tell that it's a Klingon spaceship, even though, like, me as a viewer, I see the runes on the outside of the ship, and I'm like, okay, that's very Klingon. And she's not even like, oh, this iconography is like this.
No.
Because she never acts like
She
an
doesn't do any detective work
anthropologist.
about it. She doesn't figure out stuff.
No, she just occasionally knows things about other alien races.
Which is fine. We've seen that kind of thing happen in Star Trek before. But one of the things I will disagree with you about when it comes to art direction and design stuff. Obviously, we've indicated where we don't like the Klingon design very much. But we'll leave that for next episode because the second part of this features the Klingons more. But one thing I do find annoying, and one thing I've always loved about Star Trek's designs of spaceships, uniforms, and so on and so forth, even alien design, is how sleek and simple they are. And this show thinks that bigger and more bells and whistles and jingly jangly things means more epic. So the ships are bigger, but not only are the ships bigger, they've got more stuff on the ships. They've got coffins and stuff. But when she visits the artifact and she meets the torchbearer Klingon thing, his spacesuit is just covered in junk, like CGI nonsense junk. What makes Star Trek more interesting to myself and to a lot of people is just the simplicity of and the sleekness of the design of the USS Enterprise. The original ship's design, it's sleek, it's simple. And that's a lot of things that we like about the show. And for me, the art design or the design of some things are too much noise and too much clunkiness to really appreciate. Like the uniforms have a lot of stuff going on, and I kind of wish that they were a little bit more simplistic. I like the uniforms a bit. Like they do look a bit like Pilates outfits, but that's fine. Star Trek uniforms always looks like some form of exercise equipment, exercise clothing or pajamas. I'm used to that.
Yeah, like you give that a pass. Yeah. I think part of it is that I always accept that whatever point we're in Star Trek in the art direction is a projection of our future. And at the moment, like our technology, a lot of it is you have this one thing that can do so much and everything's new and shiny and bigger and better. So I just see that as kind of a natural extension of that. And not so much as it doesn't feel that cluttered to me.
I guess so. It's just for me, I feel like a lot of jingle jangle, oh, big ship means better ship and more stuff means better stuff. And that's a little bit too on the nose for my liking. I did not like the flashbacks, although I did like one singular line from Sarek, which was, it's not the fault of your human tongue, but the fault of your human heart. I thought that was a very snappy, Vulcan-y type of line. I like the guy who plays Sarek, although I don't like the fact that he's Sarek, because he is,
he doesn't need to be.
He doesn't need to be Sarek.
Doesn't need to be.
In fact, it kind of we'll talk about that when we get to the Sarek terrorist episode, I imagine.
Yeah.
But to get into the big thing, we haven't talked too much about the actual plot of this episode, because this is an introductory episode. This episode is just building up the foundation, because the actual plot is them sitting there waiting for something to happen primarily for a lot of it. Yeah, there's stuff like Michael jetpacks across space and then she kills a thing or whatever, but a lot of it is Klingons are waiting for them to fall into the ambush. They fall into the ambush, end of episode. That's the thing. But that's Star Trek. You have lots of simplistic things sometimes. There's obviously, with Star Trek, I think of more fun sci-fi plots. This is just a conflict plot, which is, not unusual either. But we're just talking about characters and stuff because this is what we've gotten out of this primary introductory episode. Is there's lots of plot elements that are, like we said, arguments of ideological debates, always interesting. But here's something I want to talk about. Michael Burnham as a character, just to go into it again. This episode, I liked Michael, and then I said just before the death of Michael Burnham to myself as a note, because from day one, I knew before the show started that Michael Burnham's character was the sister to Spock.
Yeah.
The show introduces Sarek as her father, not actually, but her father figure.
Yeah.
And as soon as that's introduced, the character of Michael Burnham loses all interest to myself because all the inherent individualism of Michael Burnham as a character is zapped away because we are waiting as an audience for them to show Spock, to show Sarek, and to explain who she is via her relationship to Spock, a character we know from other media. And I think that actually wounds her character. And in this episode, it wounded her character because Sarek is, like, not really properly established as a character, but he is because we know who Sarek is from the other show, from the other movies, the other shows, and that makes Michael a weaker character. I think they should have just left it not being Sarek. I think she should have just had... I don't mind this backstory. I think it's interesting. But I think just attaching it to pre-existing material so strongly makes Michael's character weaker. And in this episode, it doesn't ruin her character. It will in future installments, but I think it just reduces her character's interest to me as someone who is attached to this as a whole series. To people who aren't, it's an introductory thing to these characters, but at the same time, is it a satisfying introduction to these characters? Because this show doesn't really, like, this episode and the next one doesn't really get into who the hell Sarek is. It kind of is that thing of, and this is the eternal question that we'll be discussing throughout the series, is who's this for, Star Trek Discovery? Because is it for people who have seen Star Trek before? Is it for people who haven't seen Star Trek before? Because it kind of fails at both ends.
Yeah.
At explaining things for people who are new to Star Trek and pissing off people who aren't new to Star Trek. And there's stuff like that is bothersome. Can we get into just our nitpicks of continuity bullshit that bothers us? Because I think it's good to get it out of the way now. It bothers me that there are holograms.
Yes.
It bothers me that starships can land on planets.
Yeah, they can enter atmosphere, no problem, apparently.
It bothers me that they have all these force fields everywhere. It bothers me.
Robot crew people.
It bothers me. It fucking bothers me that there's robots on the ship. Okay, so let's talk about that. It's my one note about Star Trek Picard. Star Trek Picard is set in by the same production people as this show.
Yes.
I have complained that there are robot crew members in this show when one of the pillar things of Star Trek Next Generation is Data is the first synthetic android life form that's a crew member and one that they've ever encountered with this level of expertise, of this sentience. And that's a whole thing.
Yep.
I remember complaining about this at the time because there's a robot crew member in this first episode who's not a character. They just are a robot, a Star Wars droid character who's a crew member, and they get injured and we never see them again. And you're supposed to go, oh, well, it's sci-fi. Yeah, but again, this is for that's the kind of thing where that's for people who haven't seen Star Trek before and don't know that. But then we have Star Trek Picard that follows on the whole thing from Next Generation about the importance of synths in Starfleet and in the rules. So this is by the same production crew. I know the showrunners and all that changed, but you put Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard next to each other, they're interlocked. Yeah. So one show disregards the other, and it just pisses me off even more so.
It's just one example of them either going, that looks cool or that sounds cool, and they don't think about it within the context of the broader show, because it is just a background character, and they could just be like, oh, well, like, Data's only impressive because he's smart, and it's just like, no, it's actually more than that when you go back.
Because it's the fact that he's allowed to be a Starfleet officer.
He's allowed to be a Starfleet officer, but also the song has managed to develop the technology to the point
in which it wants to
being
learn.
Like an able-bodied person, and the robot in Discovery has the
beep boop.
physicality of a human being.
But it speaks in beeps and boops like a Star Wars droid.
Yeah.
It feels too weird, and this is why we say this is the nitpick section, because this doesn't actually matter to the plot or to this show, but it is annoying when I complained about it when it first happened, and people said, "Oh, Ryan, it doesn't matter really. Like, yeah, look, it's connected to Star Trek, but also it's divorcing itself from Star Trek. Fine. There's levels of connection and levels of divorcing yourself from things that you just have to accept. Holograms, I accept that it's stupid that they're here, but they're here. All this stuff, okay, fine, I'll swallow it. But then Star Trek Picard is a show that exists, and it follows on the importance of androids that Next Gen set up. So did it forget that Discovery had androids and robots? Evidently so. And this is where you just go, if you think about it too hard, you get angry and stressed out about it. Can we talk about, okay, I've got a lot of things. Can we just say thank you, Doug Jones, for being in this show?
Oh, yes. Just Doug Jones. You're amazing.
Doug Jones.
You do amazing things, and you are mostly wasted.
He is mostly wasted, even in this episode.
You put more effort and patience into getting into costume than...
I did love his back and forth with Michael.
Yeah.
It was good. It was good. Like, you can tell that these people are they're colleagues, but they're not friends.
Yes, I forgot about that because in season 2 they cram it down your throat
That they're
so
friends.
hard, so very, very hard.
Do you not like it hard?
They are the best of friends. They are lifelong friends. They love each other. They'll do anything.
Well,
for
Rachel,
each
as we'll see in
other.
season 1, they do become that because he is
Yeah,
a
but
character
they
that evolves.
have no acknowledgement that their relationship has evolved to that.
We'll see as the show goes on, because I have some
That's
disagreements
at
on
my
that.
point.
I have some disagreements. I think Saru was set up very well as this kind of cowardly character whose whole thing
Very
is he will
effective
become...
with minimal interruptions and exposition.
But here's something I've got to say, though. This show, these first 2 episodes, are introducing us to these characters that will be important. But here's the thing. Only 2 of them are important, and we don't actually meet the rest of the characters till halfway through the show. Like, I know episode 3 has the other characters, but then that takes time to still keep introducing characters.
Yeah.
I think that's a mistake on the show. I think
It's an odd choice.
it's a definitely odd choice. I think
because
there's...
it doesn't. It adds an extra level to the inconsistency, because it's just like, well, why? Why is it this slow? Because they could have tweaked it and had Lorca at the battle, had him involved, or have him coming after, and then you just get that speeded up just a little bit so that it feels like the pacing of the season is overall better and smoother. Because it does feel very jagged, because you just you get these 2 pretty solid episodes where things are introduced and you feel like you're getting into the world, and then things shift and then shift back and then shift. And
I think
of course we speculate that has to do with production issues as well.
There's multiple schools of thought that we could go into with how things could have gone. Personally, I think this episode and the double-parter one could have been an episodes later in the season, and you have them as this is how Michael got to this stage kind of episodes.
Build up,
but
rather than build from.
Well, yeah, we build up and then we go back to what this is. Or I think, and my sister and yourself and I have talked about this, we have the first half of the season be adventures with Giorgio on the Shenzhou, and then you have this happen, and then you do the halfway through the series, you kick it, or it's always Discovery. Giorgio was captain of the Discovery. she gets killed in the same way, and then they bring Lorca in. And Lorca, and it just is the same thing, and you still have, but here's the thing, then you have the whole crew still have the animosity towards Michael like they do in later episodes, because they were her friends and she fucked things up.
That's part of the confusing thing about the structure, is that so much of the crew of the Discovery is
not
Burnham's original crew.
Well, only like 2 of them. The red-haired chick who we don't even get to know her name or have a real character on in this episode.
No.
And Saru, and that's primarily about it.
No, but it mentions that a lot of the
But we don't
background
see them.
No, they aren't proper characters.
They
But I
aren't
mean, the show sets up that a lot of the crew was transported to the new crew of the Discovery.
Do you want to go through your notes before we wrap this up? Because I have one final big conversation piece that I want to delve into, which is the Vulcan Hello itself. I think that's something, but I just want to make sure we go through our notes. I found that there was some good Goofy and some bad Goofy. So, good Goofy was when she stupidly, it's also bad, when she said, wow. And at the
yeah.
What was the line? She had some stupid line about it.
I had that down just as Burnham the poet.
Yeah, Burnham the poet. She says something silly.
The only words that I can use to describe this is
wow. And that was silly. There was the dumbest line in which she said it, and it's like a quotation. We haven't looked it up, but she says something along the lines of, whoever said sculptures are spiritually crystallized was right.
Yes.
I don't know what
Spirituality crystallized.
Spirituality crystallized? I don't know what the
Obviously.
fuck that means and why it's in this episode.
I do.
Oh, it's because the show's about faith.
Yeah, it
It's
does
about
go.
spirituality
It
and
does
faith.
go.
You know, the thing that Star Trek loves? You know, the thing that Gene Roddenberry wanted to absolutely remove was religion from the universe of Star Trek?
Yeah, okay. So, a nitpick that I do have is that she's just like, oh, wow, like, I really wish that you could see it. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Look, like, they have holograms, but they don't have cameras in their headpieces. Turns out they do.
It was just broken in interference, I
It
think.
was just broken, but she didn't know that it was broken. So she had no reason
To say that?
say that because she already knew that she was out of communication. So
True.
it wasn't like the people on the crew.
I just said
could
that she's
hear
saying that in awe of, but you're right. It's a bit clunky.
I like the school pods.
The school pods.
Yeah, on Vulcan.
Well, that was established in the Kelvin universe. I'm pretty sure that look at least.
Oh yeah, definitely
because
that
kids bully
look.
Spock there too.
Oh yeah. Makeup did a decent job with her burns. Because remember,
Oh yeah, she gets irradiated.
her DNA was gonna turn to noodles. And then
Don't you hate when that happens?
She
Yum yum.
She ran out of sick bay to the bridge, and then
Oh, Jonathan!
they did a hard,
Jonathan from 30 Rock was the doctor.
They did a hard cut to black, and then it's sometime later, and apparently she went back to get her DNA repaired.
Oh, it took 3 hours for it to get to that point, but I guess it took 20 minutes to finish up, huh?
Yeah, it was fine. It was fine.
I have that there is a lot of silly choices made in terms of where we place them in the narrative. So we have, it's a red alert situation.
Yeah.
Things are going to go sideways. Michael's back on the ship. She's back in command. She needs to call her dad.
Yeah.
For one, I don't know how she got to communicate.
It's related.
I don't know how she got to communicate.
That's all she has to say is it's related.
I don't know how
and then
she
it
got
goes
it.
off.
I don't know how she managed to transmit to him still. I don't get it. It would have been taken whatever.
But remember, he's glitchier than the Admiral
Oh
is.
yeah, you got me there. He has glitches.
But Sarek sits on the table.
Yeah, it was.
So another nitpick. The comms officer is there. He doesn't loop his own audio. He says it every time.
Well, yeah, that happens. It's silly, but it happens. I don't have many other notes. We get introduced to some characters that won't actually matter till later, like Vok.
Yeah.
And the lady Klingon.
I will say that they do not The actress who plays Michael, I think she just tears up too easily because
She does tear up a lot.
as she is saying, I am not emotional.
She's very emotional.
You see her welling up. And it's not meant to be ironic, like she's like, I'm not emotional. She's meant to be like, I am not emotional. And like you can see the tears welling up in her eyes.
Yeah, I think that's just the difference between someone like Leonard Nimoy and someone, like Leonard Nimoy did a good job of having emotions hidden under lack of emotions, but he was playing it like but they're different characters.
Yeah,
he was raised on Vulcan. I know he's half human, but he was raised on Vulcan his whole life. She wasn't. She was there when she was like 11. I don't know how old she's supposed to be.
She came to it later, and as an outsider being invited in, whereas Spock is an outsider from the inside.
So let's talk about the big conflict of this, and it really tips the scales of whether you like Michael Burnham or not.
Yeah.
She performs a mutiny.
Yeah.
Because the assumption is Klingons are inherently a warrior species, which is true. But
they will not walk away from
they will not walk away. Basically, you have to shoot first to gain their respect.
Yep. And shoot first every time.
Every time.
For
extended periods of time.
Extended period of time to build
to build
the relationship.
And that's an interesting idea.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind that conflict of we should shoot first. They're warriors. They will see it as a mark of honor and respect.
I do get weirdly annoyed that in the dialogue it's a Vulcan Hello and the episode is called The Vulcan Hello.
Yeah. But I find that an interesting idea, this Vulcan Hello.
Mm-hmm.
I think the execution isn't very good. I don't think...
Yeah, we'll come back around to that a lot. The execution
isn't
very good.
I think her Vulcan neck pinching the captain and taking charge and not being very subtle about it.
It doesn't look like
it's because they shot it very quickly.
Yeah.
I think it makes you not like Michael.
Oh, yeah.
I think it would have been better if they managed to just... conversation in rooms. And I think the problem is Giorgio, for us Trek fans, is right. But the problem is it's an inherently flawed debate because the show itself has positioned it where Michael is right and Giorgio is wrong, and there's no ambiguity to it like the other debates within the episode. There is no ambiguity. Michael's right.
Yeah.
And that can be a thing that Star Trek does a lot, but usually characters converse and make the others believe in them enough. And that was happening throughout the episode, but then she just performs a mutiny.
Yeah.
And I understand why, but it didn't adhere me to her character. And it was a stacked deck. Because here's the thing I'm going to ask you. Do you think against those Klingons, the Vulcan Hello would work?
No.
Nor do I. I don't think it would work. And that makes it a difficult situation in which I inherently believe that it won't work because these guys are fundamentalists.
Because
they're fanatics. Compared to just regular Klingons, these guys are separate.
Yeah, we know that.
We know that.
We know that. But is it before she does the mutiny or after where she has that conversation with herself or somebody else where she's just like, they're looking for a unifying force, they're looking for a war? So
I can't remember if that's in this episode or the next one because I think it's repeated in both, but yeah they're looking for this. But I think it's just I don't think the Vulcan Hello would have worked. I don't think with those guys, these fanatical guys, I don't think it would work. I don't think it would have worked. And that's just personally for me.
I think it would have potentially solved some other problems. Because if she did that before the other houses got there, like the 24 Klingon ships, then the leader of the rogue house, essentially...
Tumov. What was it? Tumar.
Tuva?
No, to Marv.
To Marv?
You remembered before we recorded.
Yeah.
He's unforgettable.
Yeah. He wouldn't have had the pull that he did because he wouldn't have given that speech to the houses
I agree.
at that point. So the Klingons wouldn't have been united. Like, they still would have faced the problem of the Klingons that were there, but the 24 ships would have gone.
Well, I disagree.
Who called us here? What's going on?
I disagree because here's what I think would have happened. We know from this episode and the next one, he has a personal hatred of the humans for his own backstory reasons.
Yes.
And I think if they did fire first, he would take it as an attack and attack them, warring the thing, and then we already have the other Federation ships coming, and we have the other Klingon ships coming. I think it would have played out the exact same way, where the Klingon ships come, and they see all these Earth ships come, and there's already a fight happening. They would have all started fighting, and the fighting, as we have been told by this show, is what unifies Klingons. Now, I know that the writing in the show, how it is portrayed, has it that how he makes the fight happen is what unifies them, but I personally don't see any other outcome of how the situation would have unfolded with these Klingons being the instigators. I don't see any difference. I personally think the Vulcan Hello would have made no difference to the situation. I think it's a stacked deck.
Yeah.
I think it's there just so that Michael is right.
Yeah.
And Giorgio was wrong, and it challenges the old, we have Starfleet principles, we don't shoot first, we are instigators of peace. I think it's a stacked deck.
Yeah. And it's also stupid because in the long run, they don't make it matter.
No, in the longer run.
Like, they just make it matter that she was right. So if they just had it and acknowledged it and done it her way, but it didn't work out properly because it took too long for them to argue, then that would have been fine too.
Yeah, I wish... You know what I also miss? I miss Captain's logs more of letting us know how much time has passed, because in between these two episodes, like, we get a moment where it's like, you've been out for 3 hours, but does that mean, like, these two, how long were these things sitting next to each other?
Episode.
Yeah, that was within this single episode. 3 hours have passed.
Like, they didn't even...
That was the only time, but I feel like...
Well, the editing shows us that it overlaps and it follows directly on because we see them.
Just for me, it feels like there's a weird time discrepancy or time display. It's time dysphoria when it comes to what is going on in these two episodes. It feels like it's either in the course of one afternoon or it could be a full 2 days worth of shit going on. But that's kind of it, isn't it? I don't think we have much else to say on this matter on the episode, The Vulcan Hello. Did you have a favorite scene in general and a least favorite aspect of the of the show? I think my favorite scenes were the ones where they were just in quarters debating. And then my least favorite moment was when she Vulcan neck pinched her to end the debate. I thought that was just, I didn't gel with it. And I still haven't. Like, the first time didn't gel with it. The second time I still haven't gelled with it. And I know where the story goes. It just feels contrived. It feels like it has to be this way. And that just isn't for me with this show.
I think I like when Giorgio responds to Michael questioning her sarcasm by saying, "It's not necessary, but I like it."
Yeah, that was cute. I enjoyed that too.
I enjoyed that moment of her being sparky, and it sets up a nice casual tone for their bridge.
Yeah.
Which they do follow through on with that, like...
With the guy who's very snarky when they're putting her out there.
There's it establishes those relationships and the ways that crew bounces off each other in a very playful way and less structured than the way that other Star Treks are. Like, it establishes how as a captain she has set the tone for her crew. but we also get to see the other side of that with how
Yeah.
like, she's relaxed in that way, but she has hard lines and is a good leader overall. It's not just like, whatever.
And we're not used to, outside of pretty much the original series, an already pre-established crew. Like when we come onto the shows, Riker's just joining the crew, and in Voyager they're all just getting together, and then shit goes sideways and things don't work out right, and DS9 they've all just literally got on there, and it takes a few episodes for Bashir to come on the ship because he had a transport error, and so it's nice to see familiarity even before we've started the show. That's nice. I agree. I think that's it for the Vulcan Hello. Now, something that we are going to be doing, and it seems very facetious at this time because the character isn't in the show, but Rachel and I have a strong fascination with the character of Hugh, Dr. Hugh Culber, by the fact that
I'd forgotten his last name.
I had to look it up. That although he's not in the show currently, we're going to have a segment at the end of each episode called the Hughdar, because both of us are fascinated with how much attention is given to him in each given episode, because the thing with both of us is, with that character, is we feel like he has zero effort put into his character via writing. He's there, but we don't know much about him. And if we
And he
come
doesn't
into-
show us anything. We are told.
on our first watch through, I want to see if there's a lot more effort put in that we didn't notice on the first watch.
The
So
actor puts in a lot of effort.
even that we have to question. I don't know. So we're going to have a segment at the end of each episode called Hughdar, in which we just go through what we learned about our favorite character. Favorite being facetious, of course. A character we want to desperately know more about and want to actually see if we've missed stuff.
So there was no blip on the Hughdar this time.
No blip on the Hughdar, but there was a blip on the Jonathan from 30 Rock Dar. He
Yes.
was the doctor in this one. The other person of color who happens to be very effeminate and gay doctor. It's very weird how these new Star Treks does repetition like that. In Star Trek Picard, you have an all-female secretive group of Romulans and another all-female secretive group of Romulans, and in this one we have like repetition in a similar way. That's kind of it. That's all we have for the Vulcan Hello. I was going to say the Vulcan Punch. Rachel, what is the episode we'll be covering next time? Is it season 1, episode 2?
It so happens that that's correct, Ryan.
What?
So this is the Battle of the Binary Stars.
Oh no!
So this synopsis isn't from CBS, it is from Netflix.
Ooh la la.
Escaping from the brig while the ship is under attack, Burnham joins the captain in an audacious plan to end a battle rapidly escalating into war.
Ooh, sounds exciting, Rachel. I'm feeling very yum yum on that. So, Rachel, the Vulcan Hello.
Yeah.
Out of yum yum, how do you rate this? Yum being bad, yum yum being good. There's no yum half yum. You have to give a yum or a yum yum. I rate this, surprisingly, a yum yum.
Yum yum.
Yum yum.
Yum yum.
So thank you very much to you people listening out there. Hopefully you've enjoyed us just rambling on and talking about some Star Trek Discovery, where we're not necessarily new to podcasting. I have my own podcast that I host with my university friend Bartek called Spin Posh Presents, where we talk about movies. Rachel's guested on there before, but this is our first time, Rachel and I, just having our own podcast and talking specifically about TV shows. Talking about television shows is a kind of a different feel. With a movie, they're self-contained usually. This is ongoing. So we're going to be feeling it out and picking up how our natural flows and rhythms of this kind of stuff happens. Like I said, we didn't talk too heavy about the beat-by-beat plot in this episode necessarily, because this episode in particular is about the setup of characters and the setup of the universe, and I feel like we focused on that more so. And like I said, we are rewatching this, so coming back at it at a second pass through and trying to hold back on just saying they didn't follow through on anything because it's shit, or it was masterful from the very beginning, or trying to find a middle ground here. Rachel, where can people follow us and find us on the internet? Don't give them our home address.
No. Various social medias are under YumYumPod.
Yes, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YumYumPod or YumYumPodcast. You can find us there. We have our YouTube as well, the YumYumPodcast. And yeah, just type in YumYumPodcast and you shall find us.
Or take a look at the episode notes for this.
Take a note of those. And we have an email as well, which is yumyumpodcast@gmail.com, if I'm not mistaken.
YumYumPod.
yumyumpod@gmail.com. So email us. Feel free to let us know your opinions on the show. Let us know how you feel about what we've talked about in the episodes. Are there things that you really want to hear from us, or things that you feel like we didn't touch upon as strongly? Or, like I said, just your general thoughts on the show, on this particular episode of the show, because we're always interested in hearing what people have to say. And we're a new podcast, so please subscribe, follow us around, rate and review us. Just show us off to all your friends, because it's, we've done a hard thing here. We're covering a little-known franchise that not enough podcasts have done before. Star Trek is a very undersaturated market, so I feel like we need a little bit of boosting support, because, not enough people are talking about Star Trek, and not enough people are talking about Yum Yum in Star Trek. The most important line of dialogue. First, there was "To boldly go where no man has gone before." Then there was "Live long and prosper," "Engage," "Earl Grey hot," there's "Coffee in that nebula," and now we have Yum Yum. So, until next time, Yum Yum.